You're listening to the Be Better Off Show by Kelly+Partners. This is a 3-part special highlighting the best moments from the show. We learn from our guests what it means for them to be healthy, wealthy, and wise. On this week's episode, we cover how to be wealthy.
A lot of people say to me, to start a business, I need a lot of money, but most people have never bought a second-hand thing in their life. You're driving around to auctions, buying bits of equipment.
Our first treadmill was my mother-in-law's treadmill from a house.
Yeah, fantastic.
Right, so
absolutely
it was dodgy.
fantastic.
Mate, I remember having a TV set up. So we had the TV on a stand. It was one of those big, thick boxes set up and the treadmill in front of it. Like it was nothing like these plasmas on the wall or anything.
Yep.
You know, and I remember, unfortunately, watching September 11 unfold, standing there next to that tree. I still remember it vividly. Watching that unfold, September 11, watching the big box TV in the studio.
So you go, 99 you founded. How many studios did you have within 5 years, roughly?
Well, we opened our first franchise in 2004.
Yeah, great.
So,
and then how's it built up from there?
So 2004 opened the first one. Then we opened 7 or 8 really quickly in the first few years, for us. And when I say that, it probably took me 5 years to open 7, to be honest.
And so you're at 2009. So now how many do you have?
13, I think it was.
Yeah.
And then we grew sort of in that period between 8, 9 and 10, roughly, we grew to about 40 odd.
And how many do you have today?
58.
58. So over the journeys now, you've had some great mentors and obviously you've taken bets from some of the more interesting people in our community over time. What are the lessons, that you've learned about life and business as you've wandered along? I heard loud and clear, be analytical, look at the big picture, be disciplined. What else really comes to mind?
I just remember when I was first started with my grandfather, so I'd be like 21 or 22 or something, 21 or 22, and my dad found a big puncher, and he said, "Look, he said to the punter, I think you'd be perfectly suited betting with my dad and my son Tom. Give them a go." And he bet on his first day, and we were very small bookmakers at the time. Obviously, Grandpa Bill was the biggest bookie in the world in the 60s, and he wanted to bet big, but I was timid and very scared and we were betting small. And this punter came along and he was far bigger than what we'd bet before, anyone we'd bet before. And he was wanting 100,000, 200,000 on horses. And I wanted to make sure that we didn't lose a lot and protect us. And so he bet that day, and on his first day betting with us, he lost 1.2 million. And I went, I can't believe it. I'm going to go to Barbados, and I'm going to go and buy Ferrari, and how good is this? I thought life can't get better than this. But because I was, I'd never dealt with a punter this size before, I reduced our risk, and of the 1.2 million, I bet back 600,000 of it. And so on the day we won 600,000, and we had liabilities or owed the other bookmakers 600,000 of this 1.2 million. And on the Monday, all the bookies expected us to settle. And that punter said, "Look, unfortunately, things have gone bad with business or whatever. I can't pay you." And we're like, "What do you mean? What you owe us 1.2 million?" And so rather than thinking I've won 600,000 going to Barbados and having a Ferrari, we're 600,000 in the hole. And it was a great lesson in that my grandfather, and thank goodness I had the support of the family and my grandfather and my dad, and we could settle with the bookies on the Monday. But I would have been obviously wiped out if I didn't have them and their support. And the lesson that came from that is really that you've got to, from a bookmaking point of view, it's very different dealing with cash clients and credit clients, and you've got to play them completely differently. But also, you've got to always be in a position that, and I think you say this regularly, you've got to always protect yourself from going broke, and being lean enough all the time to be able to pivot. And we saw that later on with the businesses that were great businesses. Like that on-course business was a terrific business. The trading business was a terrific business. TomWaterhouse.com, I thought it was going to be bigger than the Tab at some point. But all of those businesses looked like amazing businesses. And William Hill would have been 5 times in that journey over 4 years. It looked like it was going to go great for the business. And then the environment changed. We grew the in-play business through click to call to being $250 million turnover business in 10 months. And then the government changed the rules and it was gone. And so now really the lesson is keep lean, but still enough fat that you can grow, but lean enough that you can pivot all the time. And the cash flow is king, and really, things change. And you've just got to be able to adapt and always looking ahead, because what's a good business and what's good for your business right now, it may well not be in 6 months or a year's time.
That relationship between commerce, I guess, and music, and then the artist and their life. How do you for a young person out there, what's your take on that?
I thank you for the opportunity, first of all, to be able to talk about that, because it is an aspect, a very important aspect of the industry that people don't focus on. They focus on the phantasmical aspect of that, of either succeeding, of a collaboration succeeding or failing. And usually it's the failing that they like to focus on. Again, that's a ramification of tall poppy. The relationship between art and commerce is a very delicate one. It is a relationship that's almost like a marriage, where the commerce somehow can trickle through and penetrate through the personal side, because the art is a personal thing as well.
Yep.
Because it's the individual, you're selling or you're advocating your individuality.
Yep.
So it requires commerce to respect the individual aspect of whatever it is that they're selling. So, the relationships aren't easy to find. It's the only thing I could ever say and I do say to artists today, is it is vital, if you want to have any kind of journey, that you find the right business people to collaborate with. Unfortunately, rock and roll has notoriously been a breeding ground for scoundrels.
Yeah.
Scoundrels, not all of them. I'm not going to wipe the slate clean with that, because that would be terribly unfair to those real professionals out there that do an amazing job, and there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
However, there has also been this alternative community that have behaved in a very inappropriate fashion, where they prey on your vulnerabilities, they take advantage of your financial situations, they do deals with people where you as the artist don't necessarily have full transparency of. They also, as management, may not have an understanding of how that particular artist needs to be commercially and fiscally set up.
Yep.
They are all very important, vital things. I was very lucky in the early days that my mother had an accountant. My mother and father had an accountant in Footscray in Melbourne. 2 Italian brothers, the Aquaro boys. They ran a really great practice in Australia in the 70s, 80s and 90s. They've now been retired for a long time. But they set up a trust for me as a little girl.
Yep. And banked all your ITT money.
And banked all my YTT money, structured it properly, correctly, totally above board, but it was set up correctly. Now, artists of today need to understand that they are commerce. An aspect of them, if they want a roof over their head and you don't want to live off fresh air, you need to understand that you've got to set yourselves up. Now, this is a conversation you and I have had for years now, because you have been mortified through me meeting other people and so forth as to how people are set up, and in many cases very poorly. So I say to artists, make sure you find those business people that are right and you collaborate with them and you ask them the right questions, those that you don't want to ask.
Yeah, it's
that
very
you may not like the answer to. But that is an education that is vital for the arts to move forward.
What do you think is a suitable level of gearing on the types of projects that you run?
Yeah, it depends. When you start, you need the bank, because you can't start without the bank, 100%. So you get from him whatever you can. You should always pay him back. As you pay him back, he wants to give you more. Pay him back, you give him more. But then, when you reach a certain size, you must decide what you want to do. Do you want to work for him, or do you want to work for you? So that's when you start getting less into debt. That means that you will not grow as fast as you could. Agreed. But then it gives you peace of mind. Because sometimes when you're overextended, it's very difficult. See, the banks have a very, and that's worldwide, it's not only here. We learned from the others, actually. That's what they do. When there is a boom, when things are easy, banks compete with each other, and they want to give you more money than you need. And you grow very quickly, and then you are in a big hurry, and you grow as fast as you can. And they give you more than you first. And then something happens, and in today's world, it's not even to do with Australia, maybe. Greece, I don't know, with something that has nothing to do with us. Then suddenly a new face appears in the bank, and he says, you owe him money and you have to pay back. So I think that seeing that that could always happen to you, you should be always well secured. You should give him not as little as possible, but as much as possible. So then everybody is happy. Because you see, the bank manager who deals with you in the beginning is not necessarily the bank manager who finishes with you. So these are the things of life. But to start, you need them, grab as much as you can, pay them as quickly as you can, and then be comfortable.
I've got to say, the most ultimate reward was when I really made a very expensive piece of jewellery was one of the managers of Woolworths.
Yeah.
He got engaged and he came and bought this engagement ring. I'll never forget it. I was in my bedroom. And he came and collected this engagement ring in my bedroom.
Yeah.
You know, because that was my desk there in you know, I used to work in the back of the garage. I mean, that's where I used to make jewellery. I used to repair jewellery. And this guy gave me all this money. It was like $6,000. I mean, we're talking about, you know, the 70s.
75. So it's a pretty interesting thing. You could buy you could buy a house today in in Leichhardt. In those days, a home would have been
and Brett, there was the most
about
enjoyable thing
$6,000
because I never seen so much money. So what I did is I picked it up and I threw it all up in the air. I think that was one of the most beautiful things that I ever remember.
So you catch the bug of serving the client and working out of your garage. How do you then get into your first premises and put a team around you?
Yes, well then, you know, you start to realize that, you know, you have to be serious here.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be, you have to pay attention to what's happening, you know. So that's what happened is, and then I went to my bank, I went to borrow money, I remember to buy gold and to buy diamonds and all that, and I went, my first borrowing was $2,000.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and so, you know, but I had a very good bank manager that he trusted me.
Yeah.
He believed in me.
Yeah.
So I did my first collection. I sold it over Christmas. I went back to the bank. I gave him all the money, and he's tripled my credit rating.
Fantastic.
You know,
fantastic.
And then what I did is I went out and bought. Talk about property.
Yep.
I went out and bought a property in Leichhardt with $600 deposit.
Is that the property that you're still in?
You're still in 15 Catherine Street.
So 15 Catherine Street's the place to go, guys. It's where the workshop is. It's absolutely amazing. So when you think about how to build wealth, you've professional sporting career, you're very busy, you've got managers and friends and things trying to help. You're under a huge amount of demand. But did you have clear financial goals in the way that you had this clear, you know, at age 9, get to 160 Ks an hour? How did you think about that aspect of your life?
Look, I think the best way to explain my financial sort of background and what I used to think about, playing cricket, you know, and getting paid by, back then, the Australian Cricket Board, now Cricket Australia, I would have played for free.
Yeah.
I wouldn't tell them that. But I would have played for free. And all I wanted to make sure that if I can afford to have a beer after a day's play and actually get the credit card and buy a beer, and I'm happy.
Yep.
I'm playing Cricket for Australia, afford a beer or a water or whatever,
Happy
and
days.
I feel good.
Yep.
obviously that's a lot of tongue-in-cheek stuff as well. But then I knew pretty early on too. I had to look after post-cricket. So I always had one eye on post-cricket, and having a manager from a young age of about 19, I learned about sponsorship. I learned about looking at different commercial opportunities, and I look at all the sponsors and the signage around the grounds and all that type of stuff. And I wanted to use the media in a positive way and actually be very accessible both to and from the media, because I knew that one injury, I'm finished. One serious injury, I could be out of the game. Now, even though my dream was to play for Australia for a number of years, I had to go through, broke my back twice, an elbow surgery twice, an ankle surgery 6 times. I mean, that could have been the end of my career at any stage. And then what happens there? So you see all these beautiful young athletes that are cut down their prime through whatever reason. They've made a mistake, or they've missed out with their sport, or they've got injured, and then they're thrust into the big world that we know can be savage with not a lot of experience. So I always made sure that I worked full-time, even though I was playing for Australia. So I worked in menswear, selling suits, shirts and ties. I learnt about how a business is run. I learned how to deal with people, about doing invoices, about the ups and downs of sales. And without even realising it took my mind off sport. And my sport improved because I had another... And those skill sets I learnt from a guy called Richard Bowman, who's still a very close mate of mine, have set me up for business post-cricket. So I want to make sure that, get to the age of 35, if I finish cricket there, that I've got some investment properties, or I've got things working for me.
Yeah, it's a great story. And I think anyone that's watching this, it's very rare that you hear somebody that's had a career in sport at this level who actually, can share so openly that they had a full-time job, that they were working selling other people's suits and ties. And I remember when you were doing that, people would walk in and it'd be like, okay, this guy's playing for Australia, selling me a suit. But the real life education that offered, Brett, I think really demonstrates his humility, but smarts about, keeping an eye on the future.
It was you that taught me about advertising, probably by accident. But can you share with our listeners, your viewers, to, why does a business advertise, and what is the impact of that, you think, on a brand over time? Because it was good advice. It's worked okay for us.
Good. I'm glad it has. Look, fundamentally, our industry, as in the flower industry, had a very, very, again, simple go-to-market strategy. And the simple go-to-market strategy was that you opened a shop and you put an ad in the Yellow Pages. Depending on when the Yellow Pages book was coming out, you've missed out on a whole bunch of advertising. So you might have gone about 10 months early. So that was one thing. But then there was a plethora of other advertisers. So you've gone into a book, into a category, competing with everybody else that is in your industry. You're not standing out one iota. So you're sitting there where it's as easy for somebody to go across the page or point to another telephone number and ask the question around price, service, etc. Well, what's the new Yellow Pages? The new Yellow Pages is unfortunately Google. It is just as easy to go on Google, pay a bit more to stand out and be at the top of the page. And that's in paid search. Obviously, pay a lot of money to rank organically by trying to beat the Google algorithm and try and appear again naturally in organic search. And people will tell you, but that's about relevancy and so on. And I get all that. But you know what? Try and find somewhere else where your industry is not, or someone within your industry is not advertising. And then you may stand out once again. And so to that extent, back in the day, I advertised daily, and it was all about that frequency of advertising. And I had a daily ad in the Australian Financial Review, again, about that focus. So who was my target market? My target market were men who were time poor. And I know I'm not trying to sound sexist here, but simplistically, I used to see a whole bunch of suits reading the Financial Review before it was ever online. And I was thinking, well, if they're time poor, That's what they're reading. They're my target market. Hopefully they can just pull out a credit card out of their wallet and buy a bunch of flowers. It was very simple. The other place that, and I do, look, only this morning I was actually thinking, and it's rare that I listen to radio. I'm normally on calls on the way into work, but I was listening to radio, and I did have 2GB on, and I had Alan, and I was listening to a bit of Alan Jones and about the debacle that's happening with the Powerhouse Museum moving out to Parramatta, which I think is a bit of a joke. And Leo Schofield was being interviewed by Alan. But look, I must say that I owe a lot of my success to Alan Jones, but we were regulars with him. Again, it was about that frequency of advertising. Yeah. And with Alan, it was, I predated him, as in I predate with Alan going back to his 2UE days before he moved to 2GB when John Singleton got him across to come to 2GB. So, but it was about that frequency. So there was two main mediums that I believe worked really well for us early in the piece, and that was the Australian Financial Review and some local radio, which was obviously being syndicated around Australia. AFR by default was a national newspaper as well. So we were getting our brand in and around Australia by default. So advertising to me is important, and the only reason to your point, you do have to advertise, you do have to be frequent with it. I'm not convinced, of course, just because Google can be measured or because search can be measured, whether it's Google, whether it's Bing, and just because you can directly attribute a sale to a search doesn't necessarily mean that all that other stuff is not worthwhile doing. So you can't really build brand in search or on search.
And it's very interesting, James. So today, like all these online companies, whether it's Google themselves or Facebook or others, you see them now on billboards and on TV and in these other traditional channels because they do know audiences are there. It's the recency and frequency of your brand. They see a sign on the building, your original Roses Only sign that was in Chifley for so many years. That was an iconic location. And again, that was an omni-channel strategy, having a sort of hero store, more like a Gucci store, a luxury top-end store, and then your online and postal or delivery service. So I think it's quite interesting about all those things, as you say, that go into building a brand. It tends to be at the the immediacy of conversion, where they say, "Oh yeah, I've heard of Roses Only." They Google Roses Only and click on the thing, and Google take all the credit. But I'm not sure that's the reason they went to. They actually turned up to Google.
That you've built a brand when you're direct to URL or you're direct to your brand search is the most common thing being searched. Know that firstly, it's not costing you as much then on Google, which is the other thing. But if someone's going to put your brand into their browser, well, you've sort of won the game, and that's important.
If you're going to look for a silver lining out of some of the COVID-19 responses, one of the things that the early release of superannuation program has done has turned people's mind to their superannuation savings for the first time, often for many of them. Where does that nearly $1.10 go? Who's looking after it? Are they serving my needs? What's the returns been? What's it grown from and to? And also, it's made people think about superannuation as part of their personal balance sheet for the first time. Now, that's got to be a good thing.
I'm always staggered. I say to somebody, how much money do you have in superannuation? Where's it invested? What's it invested in? What was the return last year? And what are the fees that you're paying? And the answer to all of those questions is I don't know, because the money is just taken off people. People treat it as if it's not their money at all. And as an employer, when somebody comes to ask for a job, they will say, I would like to be paid $120,000 plus superannuation. And I say, well, could you give me that number as a package inclusive of superannuation, which they struggle to work out. And then I say to them, well, I pay the super and you get it. I don't get the money, you get the money, and I pay the money So why do you treat that money as if it's not valuable? It's treated as if it's an extra, as if it's not really my money and I'm never going to really see it. Now, that's not help when governments start fiddling around with rules in relation to superannuation over time. Has happened, I guess it's happened over the last 5 years. But I do think this early access has actually empowered people to understand that it is their money and they should take more interest in it.
Thanks for listening to the Be Better Off Show. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate and review on Apple Podcasts.
Have a great day.